Hey chaps, welcome back to another fantastic episode where we will be tackling a fun modification. We're going to make a GS bonnet. We're using these sections that were generously donated to me. I'm very, very happy for that. Another lovely chap is sending me the scoops to go in the holes, which is just mind-blowing how generous you people are. Just almost brings a tear to me. I'm like, oh my god. But yes, what we're going to do is we're going to put these scoops in this bonnet. It should be fairly straightforward. I've been thinking about this for years, going it must be doable. The bonnets are virtually the same. The underskin is identical, like literally the frame that these standard bonnets sit on is the same frame as the GT ones. They've got the same like recesses in them, everything. So that's also a handy hint. If you have a GS bonnet and your frame is totally stuffed, you can go get a standard bonnet and pull the inner frame off that and put it in it. It will fit. XA and B as well. No, not XA. B and C bonnets, you can do that to them. So we'll get started and show you how we're going to do this. So what we've worked out is, first off, the width is going to be easy as pie to get sorted, and measuring off the other GS bonnet over there from the very edge of this top line here to, and it's hard to see at the moment, but there's a very subtle fold basically just there, and it's 80 millimeters from there to there. So I've got that measurement, so I know where that's got to go, and I've worked out in a minute I will chop this down probably to like 10 mil from the edge and chop off that excess, and I'll just round these edges here a little bit, trim that up a bit straighter and go probably across here. I want to keep it reasonably close to these pressings because that actually makes the bonnet stronger. Every time there's a fold or a style line, the bonnet is much stronger in those areas. And then what we're going to do, the first port of call, which interesting to note that this style here is actually like effectively here. So interestingly enough, I do wonder whether or not the Ford factory just made one skin, right, and made it like this and then put it in another press and did that to it. And ultimately you could technically do that because you know they've got presses the size of buildings, and if it had a punch in it at the same time, hell, even if it didn't, I still think they could probably make one skin, put it in another machine, and it could stamp in the recesses. I don't know if that's how they did it, but it makes sense to me why you wouldn't, because that with enough force would turn into that shape. I firmly believe it's still the same amount of steel, so if that was folded the other way it would be the same height because it kicks up, but on this one it's flat and then slowly kicks up. So I think, I do honestly wonder whether or not Ford only made one skin and just stuck it through a different press to do different things. I could be wrong. If somebody worked at Ford, please tell me, but it's just a suspicion because this is actually smaller than that, like, yeah, it's sort of out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that I'm on the inside of these lines, and I'm just going to cut this bulge out effectively, just gingerly around these edges and stay on the inside of that, so it just zip 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 zip. Also I'm going to take the bonnet off in a minute too, and just cut that out so that this guy can sit down in the hole. So I have to go to where it's flat, and that should be fairly straightforward, or fairly straightforward. So, and I'm going to give another helpful hint for removing panels. Yes, my car is horrendously original. You got 4 bonnet hinges, bolt hinges. You can, in a situation like this, remove the top 2, 1, 2, and the bonnet won't fall. The back bolt is what's holding the bonnet from tipping forward. So if you're in a situation where you may be on your own and you want to get a bit of a head start, you can remove the top 2 bolts and the bonnet will not fall and collapse on you. So you start by taking out the top 2, and then if you want to get a mate or something, you take out the bottom 2 and the bonnet will come off quite easily. And when I was talking about how they've got the same pressing, see it's recessed here, the inner skin's got the same recess. There's actually another thing in there. I reckon I'm going to be trimming that out too. Just noticed. Well, we're going to learn together, aren't we? I've also noticed, rewatching some of my old videos, I sound like I'm always puffed out. That is me being incredibly nervous while filming. I still am not comfortable in or around the camera, despite everything. So I always sound, in my opinion, always puffed out, but I'm not. I'm just nervous. But you know, that's YouTuber life, really, isn't it? So yeah, so it's not too bad, this bonnet, but it's, you know, a bit wonky, so it is what it is. But when we get it off, trim that out. I reckon we'll be trimming out another brace that's in there, because it's going to have to sit pretty close to here. But we'll get cracking on that and catch you up in a second. Alrighty chaps, so that was fairly straightforward. There was an extra piece that was under this front skin that I've never encountered before, because I've never really cut open a standard bonnet, but I just trimmed it out because I know the GS bonnets don't have them, so it must be just a support for the Falcon 500 bonnets. So effectively trimmed this to the size I wanted it, set it in there, measured the top. Width is easy because it's literally sitting in the grooves. Just got my heights. It's 80mm from there to there. It's 420 from there to the front, so that's okay, or at least close enough. I don't think it's going to matter. And now I'm just going to do my whole cut, tack, cut, tack, cut, tack, and then go all the way around it. And then hopefully those bits that are in there should just fall out. Well, a little bit of tweaking, they should fall out. All I had to do basically is just cut out the bonnet so that this panel can just sit in the hole. So obviously from that to that, and hell, I mean, if you didn't care too much, you could just probably just tack around the edges and roll with that. But we're going to weld this in. Realistically, if you want to do this properly, you'd probably get it tacked in, then take the skin and the frame apart from each other, TIG weld it, make it all perfect, metal finish it, and then put the skins back together. Not on this car. This one is just an experiment to see if it is even possible, and I believe it is. So it actually sits in the hole fairly well. My main goal is to hope that this is useful for other people in the future, so that even if you encounter a GS bonnet that is totally chewed out through the front. You can still take the scoops out of it as long as it doesn't chew too much out of the scoops. You can still take the scoops out of them and put it into another bonnet and save the important bits that everybody seems to love. So I'll just do some cutting and some welding. Alrighty, so that's actually how I'm going to do this. I'm not going to film it because I'll have just an endless amount of time lapse in it. It's just unbelievable. So what I'll do is I'll catch up once I've tacked it like this all the way around. I fully expect some warpage, hence why I'm practicing on a bonnet that doesn't really matter. If it goes well, that's awesome, and I may fix the bonnet properly one day. If it goes badly, I'll just throw the bonnet in the bin. That simple. But that is actually working incredibly well. Those lines are matching up spectacularly well. So all I do is just cut probably 3 inches cut, get that little pick tool, pull the skin up. Once it's level with the finger like that, you go, oh yeah, tack it, because you're going to grind it flat anyway, and probably put filler in it as well. So once you've done that, you just tack it up, cut a bit further, tack, and you go all the way around. Cutting around these will be probably less than fun, but I mean, once you've got most of it in, you can just zip those with a little small air-powered recip saw. So instead of boring you with endless amounts of time lapse, this is how I'm doing it, and we will catch up once I've got it mostly tacked in. Hey, see you in a second. And just like that, it is tacked in pretty much, and I've gone and actually turned the bonnet over and yanked out this little piece that was inside. So that pulls out fairly easily. So now I could just be grind down all these little tacks and then weld, and then do the same thing and just keep working your way around. I mean, you probably do that one, and then you go that one, and then you go that one. Or if you were doing this for like, because this is for me and I'm just doing it as a test, but if you wanted to do this and you wanted to do it absolutely perfectly, you'd get it this far, and then you'd obviously both scoops in, and you'd leave it like this, and then you'd de-skin the bonnet and TIG weld all that up and metal finishing it all perfectly, and then put it back together. I'm not entirely sure what's faster, whether or not it's rebuilding all this on a totally stuffed bonnet or just putting in the scoops. I'm not entirely sure, but all I know is that this, and the amazing amount of people who've already asked me, are these scoops reproduction? No, these are old ones that a lovely viewer has given me. But that tells me that anybody who's making reproduction parts should start making those, considering the high demand. Even if you just made them as inserts, I think you'd absolutely make a killing. Because everybody's asked me, are those reproduction? No, they are not. As far as I'm aware, the only things you can buy is a fiberglass bonnet, which is like $1,000, a genuine bonnet that's usually about $1,500, that's usually rusty, or you can buy fiberglass sort of scoops to put on any other bonnet, but it won't really work on this one. So you don't really have a lot of options. Pay through the nose or do this basically. So what we'll do now is we'll do that side, and hope to the man upstairs that I get them lined up to each other. But that, I mean, okay, mind you, that's not warpage. That bonnet already had dents in it. It had been crushed through here. So when I've finished welding this in, before I put filler in it. I'll use my dent pulling machine and pull up all the dents and get it pretty close. I don't want to make this bonnet perfect, because I like to keep the patina for now. One day I'll fix it properly, and if I was going to fix it properly, I'd just cut this whole junk out and put a new piece in. But making good progress, actually gone rather well. Catch up in a second. Alrighty, so we got the next one cut in. Now, I've only found this on this standard bonnets, but early part of the video I was talking about there's an extra thingy that's in here. I don't really know what it is. It's got a groove in there, so I've just trimmed it out for now because there's this. So I've trimmed it out in bits actually. See, I cut the first piece and then cut this bit out. You got to cut that out so the scoop can sit in. It must be something that's only on standard bonnets. Interestingly enough, so if you're doing this at home, you'll have to cut that out too, but make sure you don't cut that frame, because that's the bit that's the same as the standard GS bonnets. But once you've done that, that should drop in quite nicely. Basically, just make sure that you don't cut bigger than your piece that you're putting in, because you're going to have a bad time if you do that. But pretty much as it sits, it's actually looking rather lovely. And you know, the pieces of advice I give people always doubt themselves, and they always say, what if I fail? And my instant response to what if you fail is, what if you succeed? You know, stay positive. You don't know that you could do something unless you try. But if you don't think you've got the skills to do this, don't be afraid to ask somebody to help you with it. Like, asking for help is one of the hardest things I think anybody could ever do, is actually admitting that you need help. I need help at all times for all sorts of stuff. Plenty of things I don't know how to do. But that's my advice. If you think you're going to fail, just think to yourself, what if you succeed? Bit of motivation for those who doubt themselves a bit too much, like myself. But where we're at to next is to basically get it sitting exactly where we want to, clamp it in, and then do what we did here, which is just I need to put another disc on that grinder, cut, tack, and get it in there. I did have an issue before where it was starting to, because every time you weld it pulls it together, so it was getting a bit bunched up here, so I had to recut that and get it a bit better, but it still sits in there rather well. So we're going to do that to there, and then after that, because I want to do it with some concentration, we'll catch up once it's tacked in. So what I've just done there is yanked out the other remaining piece that's in there that usually falls through. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, but basically because you're starting with it being ever so slightly overlapped and you're cutting through effectively this to have these two level up, this piece hangs on the underneath, but sometimes it will actually, when you do your tacks to weld the two skins together, it will stick to the inside, but normally not very well. So with a little bit of, you know, a bit of glove and a bit of yank and a little bit of tapping and maybe some manhandling, that will come out. And then basically you just have a butt joint left now. So the scoops are effectively in. Now I'm going to put a disclaimer in there. I am not doing this, but if you were to do this like the bee's knees, this is the point where you would stop, you would de-skin the bonnet and frame together, and then fix up all the rust that is absolutely between the two frames and is always there on any bonnet. That's when you would take them apart. You would then, if you had a TIG welder, you'd actually probably grind down all these little welds, and then you'd come along and TIG weld all this together and metal finish it, and obviously fix all the rust in the other frames and stuff like that, and straighten up this, and then you'd put the two skins back together. That's when you would do that. But I am not doing that because this car is basically a test mule, and I want to drive the thing, and I don't want to have it be in pieces for, you know, years and years and years. One day down the track I will pull it off the road and fix everything properly, and at that point in time, if the bonnet has survived that much time, I'll probably de-skin it then and redo it. But the idea of this is just to see if it's even possible, and perfectly honest, 100% you can put GS scoops into a standard bonnet, and I don't actually think, I mean, these dents were here before, I don't actually think it's turned out too bad. I mean, this dent was here before, but that one has, that side of the bonnet's actually really, really good, and that scoop fits in there perfectly. So if you're feeling game, you more than certainly can chop them up and put them in. And some people would say, why didn't you put the whole thing in as one? Well, because it was in two pieces. Plus, I actually like the fact that I've done it like this, because I don't have a weld running across here or here. I actually like the fact that it's like that. Plus it leaves this dead center perfect, and then you can just fill up to it and leave that center all absolutely spot on perfect. But now I'm going to actually just spend some time and grind and weld and grind and weld and grind and weld and grind and weld, and I'll catch you up once I have the whole scoops welded in and looking lovely. Haven't quite finished, but I thought I'd show you part way through. After many tacks later, we've still got a lot more to go, but you can see there's not actually an insane amount of heat going into it. Obviously you can tell by the fact that the paint isn't burnt off. When it's real close it is, but for the most part that's a good sign that there isn't actually a huge amount of heat going into it. I mean, it's absolutely 100% going to warp a little bit. It's nearly impossible. Even when people TIG weld and things like that, they warp, and you have to, after welding anything, you've got to rework it. It's just, I mean, some people might be more skilled than me, but I've never been able to get something like this perfect without any warpage. It's just, you know, it's a MIG. It's you know, it's not capable of producing spotless work. But you know, I thought I'd show you that there's not an insane amount of heat going into it, because most of the paint's still there. So, you know, tack here, tack here, tack here, tack here, tack here, then here, 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 or you could go across here. You just can't do them next to each other. If you went and did like tack, 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 you would hugely warp the panel. So to minimize it, you really need to keep your heat to a sort of a, you know, just don't put excessive amounts of heat into it. You also notice that I don't tend to, you know, cool my stuff down. I let it cool down naturally. Just something I've got into the use of doing. So I'll go tack, tack, you know, tack, 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 tack. Then I'll give it a good 5-10 minutes to let the whole panel reduce back down to its, you know, so I don't nuke your hand temperature. And then I'll come back around, and it takes a while. There's been some time between this scene and the last one. I like to let the panel cool between sessions, so you could go, yeah, around, cool, go around, cool, go around, cool, go around, cool. And at this point I'm going to actually probably grind all these down and then do the ones in between, because I've also found that when they're like this close to each other, when you do the blob in between, when they're like that, the one in the middle doesn't tend to penetrate that well because it's trying to get over the height of the other two, if that makes any sense. So when they're that close to each other, you're better off grinding it flat and then zapping in the middle. That way the weld doesn't have anything to climb over. I know that's probably the most lamest terms I could ever have said that, but I just find that if you went to fill that while it's like that, it just won't get through. It'll do it, but the blob in the middle won't be as penetrated. And I'm sure there's plenty of welders out there who'll probably disagree with the way I do things, but you know, everybody has their own preferred method, and this happens to be mine. So now I'll catch up when it's all welded in and looking lovely. Alrighty chaps, and this is where I'm going to leave this video. Pretty much that's the gist of it. That's what's involved in putting in scoops into your Falcon 500 bonnet. Possibly you may want to have started with a better bonnet than I started with, but it was totally an experiment. I didn't even know if it could be done. I suspected it could, and apparently yes it can. Now I'm not a magician. It is not perfect. It is warped slightly in a couple of spots. It dipped in a bit here, it's sitting a bit high here, it's sunk in a bit there, but realistically it's not too bad. It didn't change the whole bonnet, it's just, you know, pretty much where some filler's going to go, and it didn't actually affect that lovely ridge down the dead center, so that's actually really nice. I mean, it's dented from, you know, being pretty old and second hand. And also I got to come back and fill in any of these little holes. When doing this kind of stuff, make sure you don't leave any holes in your welds. Make sure they're super sealed up, because if you decided to just fill over that, that's a spot where rust could potentially come back. You got to make sure all of it's gone. There's no pinholes, there's nothing. You can't have anywhere where moisture could potentially set in. I think if I was going to do this again, I would even cut these, like on this, okay, this is easy to show. I reckon I would cut it even closer to here. I'd probably do it, you got to stay sort of, because it sweeps down, but I reckon I'd pull it in another 10 mil, I reckon. But yeah, keeping it close to that did a wonder to that. A little bit wavy, but not too bad. And I reckon I would cut it back a little bit closer to here as well. Just keep as close to as possible as any of these hard ridges and stuff like that, because it will make the bodywork a lot easier down the track. But there we go. I would consider that a bit of a win. I mean, obviously I've still got to do this side, but I'm not going to bore you with that because it's pretty mind-numbing. And I reckon what I'll do is, once I've finished it all and it's all looking pretty back on the car, then I'll catch up in a totally random update or something. I'll just slip into another video the finished result. But yeah, it's pretty much you know, pretty much there. I mean, if you, at this point in time, if you wanted to go full GT, you could install your lockdowns, but my humble opinion, they're actually a bit of a pain because you've got to undo them before you can even pull the cable. So, I mean, only purists really love them. I'm not a big fan. Also, they rattle around too. I'm quite fond of the XCGS bonnet, which basically is the scoops without them. But there we go. If you happen to have scoops and you happen to have a Falcon 500 bonnet and you really want them, there you go. Enough ramblings from me. I will see you on another episode, and thank you very much for watching, and see you around, chaps.